My name is Byron Johnson. I direct the Institute for Studies of Religion here at Baylor University. And we're delighted to have Ted Baehr back on campus. Ted's been here many times and knows so many people on campus. And he was here last year. I didn't see him on that trip, but I did see him on the trip before. And his bio is in the brochure, so I won't go through the whole thing, but just I wanted to mention a few things to you about Ted. As you all know, he's the founder and chairman of MovieGuide.org and the Christian Film and Television Commission. And he's become a fixture in Hollywood. But in addition to all the good work that he does there, he's written many books. He gives lectures around the world. He's a Dartmouth grad, NYU law school grad as well, and he's done other postgraduate education at universities throughout Europe. He's cited all the time. I was just showing him an article in the Wall Street Journal from Friday, and he pointed out the article on the other page is all about the movie Noah, and who did they call to get a reaction? But they called Ted to talk about that. In fact, we were just now doing one-upsmanship. I know so-and-so. Oh, I know so-and-so. I know so-and-so. And about 10 minutes in, you realize you're not in Ted's league. Because he really does know just about everybody on the face of the planet, and including having people like Steven Spielberg on speed dial and things like that. One of the things that he does that's just so creative is he hosts the Faith and Values Award Gala and report to the entertainment industry that the Templeton Foundation funds every year. And it's a major event. They give out significant prizes, the $100,000 Epiphany Prize. They give out two of those. They give out the Kairos Prize, contest for spirituality and uplifting screenplays. And it's a way of bringing salt and light into the industry that he cares so much about. In fact, his parents were actors as well, going back to his early days, I think, in New York. And so we're just very pleased. We have a major conference here in the fall that some of you will want to take note of. The Institute for Faith and Learning that does great conferences every year at Baylor. We're partnering with them next year on a conference called Faith and Film. And this is kind of the brainchild of Philip Jenkins, one of our ISR faculty here to the left, and Darren Davis. And so Ted's going to give us some insights about that conference. And so stay tuned. We think it's going to be a fabulous event. But join me in welcoming Ted Baehr back to campus.
Thank you so much. I was enjoying listening to Byron. Who would rather have him speak today? This is wonderful. I do this all the time. But I'm going to start out at a little bit different point. And Tommy Lou's come to our gala. Did you enjoy it?
Oh, it was wonderful. Absolutely amazing.
And we have people here who've worked with us and been friends for a long time, so this is like a family reunion here. And Michael and Corey have been friends since 1982, 83, sometime during the dark ages, right? This is great.
Well, you're a youth.
I grew up in the entertainment industry. I did not grow up a Christian or a Baptist. I grew up doing all the things that everybody thinks is nefarious about the entertainment industry, but I thought that was just the way life was. I even did drugs with my father, and we used to pile up drugs at Dartmouth and split them. And then after I got out of law school, my parents were stars. My father won the box office award in 1936. My mother was a star with MGM. And after I got out of law school, my supplier, Peter Fonda, said, "We want to start a film company. Can you help us?" So I raised the money for 5 feature films. Actually, let me take a step back. I was just out of law school, and I worked at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I started the environmental law department there. And I was asked to do the legal work because they couldn't afford to hire a lawyer. So I do the legal work, and the next thing they do, they say, "Well, we don't have any money to pay you. Can you raise the money for these films?" And one of them was Oliver Stone's first film, and if you look at that, you'll be shocked, so don't look at it. And so then these 3 women who had grown up, I had been best friends with their kids on Long Island and Oyster Bay, and they had come to Christ through Billy Graham, and they kept trying to hound me into the kingdom, and it didn't work, and I would just go off on these tangents. I was a member of the National Lawyers Guild, which was a communist organization representing the Chicago Seven. And I can't even tell you about our board meetings because they were so bad. And then one woman said, why don't you just read the Bible and tell me why you're so angry at God? So this is your story of the Bible. And I got about halfway through Matthew, and God just touched my heart. I realized that there was nothing wrong with the Bible. What was wrong was with me, and that God was reaching out to me. And I just had this incredible change. All the things, my mother had died when I was young, so all the things I was looking for through either drugs or sex or filling the holes in my life, then I woke up the next day and I felt content and I felt joyous and the sky was bluer and I thought I'll start praying. So I started going to Brick Presbyterian Church in New York, and the pastor said, why don't you come on Sunday? And I said, what do you do on Sunday? And he said, well, we have music and we have all this good stuff. And it was a beautiful church in New York, if you've ever been to it. It's a classic church. And I said, that's great. What time? He said, 9 a.m. And I said, what the... I'm not going to finish that. 9 a.m. I grew up in the entertainment business. I was an understudy on Broadway. So why would I want to get up at that hour in the morning? But I did, and I thought, I've got to find out more about this. So I went down to Princeton Seminary, and they wanted me to move there. James McCord. Do you remember James? Mm-hmm. And he said, we'd love to have you, but you got to move here. But I was financing films. I thought I was in the film industry, and I'd grown up in it. So I went to an Episcopal cemetery in New York. Forgive me for anybody who knows. And to get me out of the diocese, they elected me head of the Episcopal Radio TV, which did The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe on CBS television. And it had taken 26 years, that's just about when you guys met me, the average movie in Hollywood takes 13 years. And this had taken 26 years, which is not a long time. Evita took 25 years, the first Spider-Man took 23 years. Avatar, I guess, took 30 years, so because they didn't have the equipment to make it 30 years ago. So it takes a long time to make a movie, and my friend who just made the movie that you talked about has been trying to do it since the 80s. But I knew the industry, so we got Kraft to support it, we got on CBS television, we had 37 million viewers, and we won an Emmy Award. And then C.S. Lewis's stepson, who is the godfather of my granddaughter, my first granddaughter, said, why don't we make it as a feature film? And I said, if it takes another 26 years, I'll be 60. It took another 26 years, and I didn't do that. So I said, how can we redeem the media if it's so hard? At that point, they wrote a book called Hollywood Babylon in 1988, showing how debauched Hollywood was and how debauched the movies, and none of you remember this, but there were movies like, I shouldn't even say the name of them, Deep something, and all sorts of things. I mean, there were slasher, there were actual just horrible stuff going on there. Oops, I'll get my computer. I'm not even to my talk yet. So, Corey, if I have to call upon you, I will.
No problem.
So, I said there must be some way to bring the good news to the mass media. And I heard the story of the old church film offices, and I'll go through that in a second. And I just said, we've got to figure out what to do. When we started, there was one movie, Trip to Bountiful, with a positive reference to Jesus. And for whatever you think about it, last year there were 66% of the movies, and now there's a flood of those movies. And so, it's as Ronald Reagan said, we don't care who gets the credit. I don't need to do another Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. What we need to do is to redeem the culture for the benefit of our children and grandchildren. So I'm going to talk about triumphing over our greatest challenge, and I put great challenge, but I care about the media. As Byron said, I grew up in the entertainment industry, and I'm here to be your advocate in Hollywood. And our key way of influencing Hollywood is we do this detailed economic analysis of the box office. So we show what does better, and that's why we're in the Wall Street Journal today, because they call us and tell us about movies and what they do. I mean, we do such good studies on the media that does anybody here know about Legendary Pictures? Legendary Pictures is the one who does Superman and Batman. Well, at the Variety Conference, which hold once a year, one of the founders of Legendary Pictures, he said, the reason I put the Jesus myth into Super. He's Jewish. I mean, he's a friend. Okay, he came to our gala. He's a nice guy. Is because Ted shows me that I can make more money. In my last movie, we made over $1 billion. Well, if you remember, in this episode of the Superman movie, what happened? Superman goes to church, and he actually seeks to understand what he should do, which is to take a leap of faith. And he's got a big stained glass window. So they made over $1 billion, and they're very happy. But after it was all over, Peter is looking at this guy, and he's collecting all these movie guide reports, which I guess are outside, right? And I say, well, and Peter says, why are you doing that? He said, well, that's the way I raise money for Legendary Pictures. That's the way I determine what my movies are going to be. So it's just become like the study we were talking about this morning. It's just an economic incentive that if you want to do better at the box office, this is the way you do it. We're not out there do thumbs up or thumbs down. That's what the secular critics do. We don't do thumbs up. We help people understand who the audience is and how to reach that audience. And what we find out, and you can all laugh, is that audiences love great movies. So, well, that's a no-brainer. But how do you make a great movie? Great movies are great stories well told, and we teach people how to make great stories well told. It's a very difficult craft. I know I were talking today about when people come to Hollywood, usually they make a lot of mistakes, but one, they don't understand that filmmaking is a business, and it's a craft, and it's like building a bridge. If one of the pylons are just out of place, the bridge is going to collapse. Well, with filmmaking, if you miss your first plot point, there used to be a place online where you could see it. By 1 second, you lose like $1 million at the box office. So it is very precise. And I was head of a department at Berkeley, and I'd tell my students, what did you think of Bourne Ultimatum? Now you know how long ago that was. And they'd say, well, it was very good. I'd say, what do you think of the ending? And they said, well, it was terrible. I was let down at the end. And I said, because they missed the plot point. They didn't understand where to put that. It's just like technology. There's a technology of making the story. They have a positive worldview because most people all over the world want good to triumph over evil. They have a tough life. As I was talking to Byron coming over, my wife's been on chemotherapy for 19 years. Michael's just had a heart problem, which was a major operation. We want good to triumph over evil. We want Michael to survive. I want my wife to survive. I love her dearly. And they're spiritually inspiring. When Superman finds out in Man of Steel that he can't solve the plot problem, he's got to go to church to pray. So whatever you think about that, even those movies do better overseas. So The Passion of the Christ did better per capita in Saudi Arabia than it did in the United States. The big Noah movie, we can all talk about Noah later. It's had the biggest opening that Russia has ever had for a movie. So it's not just like it's in the United States that people want this. They actually do better overseas. So we look at the domestic box office, and 90% had strong Christian content. Now, I know some of the people in the world who aren't making movies think, well, that's terrible. One woman said to me, well, for instance, with the Legendary Pictures, that's terrible. He's just putting this content in to make money. And I said, well, Paul said, we don't care why the gospel is preached, whether it's out of greed or envy. And actually, the people who are making the best movies with faith and values are not Christians, because they're not restricted by all of our angst about coming out and saying we're Christian. So none of them were rated R, none of them had anti-American content. I could go on and on about that. You can get the report outside, I'll give it to you. 98% of the 140 million people who go to Walmart every week want safe family programming. So this is a no-brainer. That means 2% are seeking out the other. Top International, 100% had strong faith and values. I mean, overt. This is not like it's covert. This is overt. We now have God's Not Dead doing better per screen than any other movie in the theaters. And people are cheering in places that you don't expect them to cheer. New York and Miami. So very strong Christian content constantly does better at the box office. Now, I get a lot of people who say that, especially in my Berkeley class, who want to make cutting-edge films that think we just want to show. I mean, one guy said, I want to add more sex and violence in my film. I said, that's okay. If you're making some art, I'm not going to sit there because I'm teaching and I don't want them to get upset, but you're not going to make any money. The average sex and violence film, I mean mainline sex and violence, does under $1 million at the box office. Consider that. At $10 a ticket, that's less than, what? That's less than handful of people going to it in a country of 340 million. So the way we reach Hollywood is showing them these figures, but the other side of the coin, and that's what we're here to talk about today, is that movies can and do have a tremendous influence. And if Walt was alive today, and my cousin worked for Walt and then built a railroad in Northern California, and Walt was a very nice guy, and I remember going on the first ride at the Matterhorn ride, and he was letting us in and wouldn't let the press in. But if he was talking today, he'd talk about Max and all the different ways that you can deliver content and all the different technologies that are available. They have a tremendous influence. The more educated, the more concerned you are about the mass media. And this figures keep increasing, and I figured that was one of the reasons I was head of the department at City University of New York, and another reason I was head of the department at Berkeley. But the fact of the matter is, the more intelligent you are, the more affected you are. So these are the people who get it. They understand. Because the more intelligent the child is, the more he's getting his scripts of behavior from what he's watching. You can watch it as a child is watching a program with violence. I mean, I have 4 children. I have 3 boys. The second one is a Marine. I remember driving in a car once. We were going to the Grand Canyon, and I hear the scream in the back, and one of them hit the other one. I'm not going to tell you which one it was. And then I asked him who did it, and then one of them lied and said, nobody did anything. And so, they all had their propensity. In fact, we've had over 500,000 studies on the mass media. We did studies at City University in the late 70s to put myself through cemetery. We've done studies at every university I've ever been involved with. And they're doing studies here, I'm sure, at Baylor. But all those studies, there has only been one study in 1985 that says the media doesn't have an influence. And it was funded by ABC Television. And, ABC Television doesn't believe it because $74 billion go into advertising every year. Imagine ABC Television telling people, well, don't pay for these programs because your advertising is not going to go do any good. You can't sell useless products. Nobody gets influenced by this. Right? And it's a no-brainer. By the time a child is 17 years old, they've spent 60,000 hours of the mass media, 11,000 hours in school. When I was at the department at Berkeley, one of the professors at University of California, San Diego, decided I can't compete with the media. He just turned on the TV and left the room. And it made the LA Times, it made national news. And then 2,000 hours with parents. Now look at this in terms of my mother's family settled Texas in the 1830s and 40s. They named the town of Hunt and Ingram. If you were in the Texas Ranger Museum there, you've got one of them, go see it. My father, Bob Tex Allen, is in the Texas Ranger Museum. I should go see it today, but I don't have time, and they want me to. But when my mother grew up in 1906, hi Sarah Jane, nice to see you. When my mother grew up in 1906, where did you get your values from? Where did you get your scripts of behavior? I mean, well, you got them from your family and from your church. The church was the place where you went to find out intellectual stimulation. When you heard the sermon, or they had a guest speaker, you got food, you got coffee. I don't know whether you had donuts in 1906, but you had a community there. And that has been replaced by the mass media. So the scripts of behavior are coming from somebody else, and we know that $74 billion goes into advertising. And no matter who says that the media doesn't have an influence, if it didn't, there wouldn't be any money being put into advertising products, especially products that you don't need, which are quite a few of them, as a matter of fact. Boys are fed large doses of violence. Now, all the studies show that different people have different propensities. I told the story about my 4 kids going across the Grand Canyon. Some people are susceptible to violence, about 7 to 11% from the study. Some people are susceptible to drugs. Dartmouth did studies that showed that 25% want to use drugs. I guess I was susceptible because I was a pudgy little teddy bear. My mother had died, and I was just sort of escapist. Some are susceptible to sex. Some are susceptible to buying products they don't need. Consumerism. That's why God has 7 deadly sins. We're all susceptible to something. And the congressional study, the LA Times, the New York Times, all say that the evidence is irrefutable, and you know that because you're well
The reports
educated.
on this guy are that he was a PhD student.
Smart.
He was described as very smart, but in the process of dropping out of graduate school. He is said to have few friends, barely any social life, and they say he allegedly lost touch with reality after becoming obsessed with video games, including role-playing games, something called World of Warcraft, where you compete against people on the internet. The point is, it seems like he was getting more and more withdrawn, to the point where, Doc, and I don't know what this means, but when his mother was contacted about the incident on Friday, she reportedly said to the reporters, "You have the right person. I need to call the police and fly out to Colorado."
You know, Michael and Corey have heard me say this before, but, you know, he grew up in an evangelical Christian home. He grew up in a very Christian neighborhood in San Diego. He went to a very Christian school that a friend of mine was the head of, and Denise D'Souza used to send his kids there. And he went to, you know, a very Christian church that a friend of mine is the head of, James Garlow. So he's not what we would think, oh, this only affects people that are caught in inner city Bronx or Brooklyn or whatever else who are bad families. This is one of us. And he got it. He was smart. He was one of the ones who were susceptible to violence. And does it matter? I mean, there are hundreds of millions of people that just don't, millions of people who don't ever get hit, but 82 people injured or killed. So it matters to the mothers, the fathers, the children, the people who survived. They're susceptible. 90% of the children are abandoning the values of their parents, and I showed this at Lifeway about 10 years ago when it first came out of Cornell. Lifeway did a study that something like 18% go back to faith when they have children. A new study shows that women who have little girls get more concerned about the media. There are all these studies that have come out of it. But even if 18% revert back to Christianity, that means you're losing a lot of people. And what does that mean for the culture? What does it mean to be a Christian? It's love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faith, gentleness, and self-control. That's what got my heart. To live in a society where you weren't killing, maiming, mutilating, backbiting, you know, indulging in all the horrors that I grew up with. In New York, pounding the streets, going to the movies and plays that my father was in. This Christian culture is a blessing. I mean, Byron was talking about it today, that everywhere the missionaries went, the culture improved. The libraries were full. It's the Woodbury study, right? And this should be obvious to us. I have offices in Germany, we have offices in Korea, we have offices in India. When I spoke in India 26 years ago, most of them came to Christ. One of them churched 22,000 people. He's now got a big television network. He takes lepers into his home. That's unheard of in India. To see the transformation of love is absolutely incredible. How did this happen, that we lost the culture? Our greatest threat. Well, during the golden age of Hollywood, when Mr. Smith went to Washington, it was a wonderful life, and the bells of St. Mary rang out across the land. Of course, the church had its offices in Hollywood. Now, you don't hear about them, but they were the people that didn't have any censorship power. Censorship power is the TSA saying you can't take water, you can't yell bomb. It's being put into an airport detention because you've said something wrong. All they could do was to reason with people. Say, how many empty seats do you want at the theater? That's all they could do. And if the studio said, we don't care how many empty seats, then they could make any movie they want. They could add, frankly, my dear, I couldn't give a blank, even if the Protestant Film Office said, you may not want to use that because you're going to get some, well, they didn't get empty seats in that case. But those were the mainstays of Hollywood during the golden age. And my father was a star at that time. He starred in about 80 movies. IMDb shows 49 of those movies. I was going to show you a clip of one of his old westerns, but I thought, oh, this crowd is too sophisticated. He'd been in the cavalry, so he could ride underneath the horse and shoot the tin cans up in the air. He was incredible. And then in the 1960s, the church abandoned Hollywood. Some of you know why. When I'm talking to Hollywood, I say we went from, films that everybody could see, even films that had tough subject matters like Bridge Over the River Kwai or Manchurian Candidate. Those were tough films. But none of it was presented in a way that would alienate kids. As my friend Ron Maxwell at the Gettysburg did. Gettysburg is probably one of the cleanest films you'll ever see. He said, I don't have to use porno violence to communicate how horrible violence is. And if you remember in Gettysburg, when Armistead comes over the wall, what does he do? He's dying. Everybody says, General, you're dying. We got to help you. He says that he's only worried about Chamberlain because he went to West Point with Chamberlain. And you see more of the pathos of war in that scene than if you'd seen his body blown up. Because these two guys loved each other, although one was from the north, the other was from the south. So when they went from, the church, the Protestant film office was the last film office. It shut down actually because the Southern Baptists pulled their funding. They were about 60% of the funding. They were having problems with Bob Jones and other people, so they tried to move to a more conservative position, and by doing that, they left the mission field. And I've been to many countries and done films in Sri Lanka where when the church left the mission field, Sri Lanka ended up splitting into Sinhalese and Tamil, and they started killing each other, and 500,000 have been killed. So you went from 100% films that anybody should see or could see to 82% restricted. If you're going to restrict the box office, look what happens to the number of people going. You went from the greatest story ever told to the first sex and Satanism film. You went from The Sound of Music to the first X-rated film. And the box office suffered, and it has never recovered. That's why we have so much positive effect there, because they wanted to recover. And you went into a world of scripts of behavior that were self-destructive. Unwed births shot up, divorce, prison population. A friend of mine from Prison Fellowship was looking at those unwed births. It's a terrible thing. Welfare spending. And I was talking to church, in fact, I remember talking at Baylor last fall, but at a church, and the kids said, we don't care, but you owe money, not for my son in the Marine Corps, not for the building and roads programs, not for the Supreme Court, for the breakdown of morality. For the scripts of behavior that we bought into. And I don't know who here can afford this bill. I can't afford it. I'm a missionary. So the solution starts with you. What's needed? We need to make a difference in Hollywood, and we're doing that with your help. And we need to teach kids media wisdom. In Hollywood, we give out these teddy bear awards that I posed for when I was younger. When I first met, Michael and Corey. So redemptive content continues to increase. And I think that's good news, and I think that's by God's grace. I thought it would stop at around 45%, which is what the Wall Street Journal was talking about in 2004, but it keeps increasing, which is really a miracle. It's a God thing. Major filmmakers tell us, like one of the heads, Glenn Keane used to be the head of animation at Disney, that we've made a difference. We've helped them to be themselves, to be able to speak from their heart. And there are so many of them. I was telling Byron today, I spoke at the I was telling Michael and Corey, I spoke at the Producers Guild. Producers Guild, you think you're going to speak at that it's a very tough place. And at the Producers Guild, my daughter and I were there. Jerry Bruckheimer, J.J. Abrams, and Mark Burnett got up and said, I want to spend the rest of my life telling people about the Bible because it's true, and telling them about Jesus because he's real. 90% of the people, this is a full room for the board meeting of the Producers Guild, after Jerry Bruckheimer and J.J. Abrams stood up and cheered. This is Hollywood. I don't think that would happen in Baylor. So, faith looks at a seed and sees a tree, looks at a mountain with a Hollywood sign, and this year you've got 34 movies with strong faith and values coming out. What does that mean? Well, there are only 300 movies released a year. There are only 140 movies released by the studios. It means that, now we don't have to like every one of those movies, but I've seen some of them. Heaven is for Real is absolutely terrific. Some of them are absolutely great. Some of them we worked on the scripts. Have you seen Heaven is for Real? It is so good. Randall Wallace, who did Braveheart, is the director and helped write the script, and it's just great. So what we do with Movie Guide has a tremendous influence. This is a quote not from Plato. This is a quote from Sarah Jane, who's sitting next to Peter. And before I get to that quote, Byron and I were talking about the Bible. We always put a Bible into our gift bag, aside from other people, Jerry Bruckheimer, and people putting their movies into the gift bag. I don't know what was in the gift bag when you were there. And one woman calls up my executive producer, Susan Wales. Her husband did Christie and Amazing Grace, and she says, you had this book in the gift bag, and it answers all my questions about life. And Susan's saying, well, which book is it? Is it Heaven for Real? Is it what book? I said, well, it's called the Bible. It's like my story of, what do you do on Sunday? We presume that the rest of the culture knows, but they don't. We're missionaries to a wonderful group of people that I love dearly. But we also have to train Christians to be great filmmakers. That's why I'm glad that Michael and Corey are here and Sarah Jane is doing that. Because a civilization that forgets how to tell its story dies. And I believe for too long we forgot how to tell the story. This is a good story. This is the greatest story ever told. So we teach that. I'm always expecting that we're going to get a bunch of Christians coming into the class. Michael's son has come, but usually we get Hollywood people in the class. Usually we get producers, writers, directors. One guy who made $175 million on his last film said, if I'd only known before I did my movie what I know now, because he only got $2 million from Sony out of making $175 million. So we teach contracts and distribution. Everything. Baylor should be doing this. Every school in the country, Christian schools, should be doing this. I just got a little plaque for helping to start the film department at Biola. I don't go back there anymore. They're on their own. Michael knows that we keep withdrawing from things. We want to see people take over. Somebody said, you can't let your daughter do all the interviews. She did 130 interviews or 40. And I said, thank God that we have new generation that can step in and make a difference. And our biggest audience is 18 to 24. This is good news. We reach millions of people. The Facebook went from a couple thousand to 2.5 million. Radio went from 1 million to 21 million. And the internet is just out of sight. And we go on secular stations. They actually pay us to be on Reels TV instead of being on Christian television. But the key to making great movies is plot first, character second, dialogue third, idea fourth, music fifth, and spectacle. We've talked about that here. The problem that most people think is they think spectacle comes first. I'm sorry, Corey. So Peter Jackson, and I was just with Peter Jackson. We were at the press junket for, The Hobbit, and Peter and I were just going over we were the only ones at the food table. That's because I'm a Baehr. I don't know who Peter Jackson is. But Baehrs love food. So we're sitting here, and Peter comes over, and we start chatting about it. And King Kong failed at the box office because he's put so many special effects in it. If there had been one more dinosaur fight, I was going to walk out of the theater. Now, was it immoral? No. But it was just too much spectacle. Music. There was a Bob Dylan movie about 2 years ago. He used to be a big star. It did less than $100,000 at the box office. Idea expelled, bombed at the box office, and went bankrupt, and was funded in Texas. Dialogue, My Dinner with Andre, character. It's all story, story, story. I can't tell you how many people come to me, who are Christian filmmakers. Oh, God told me to write this script. Somebody that's on the film committee at NRB. I downloaded the script from the Holy Spirit. I said, well, have you rewritten it? Have you checked your spelling? Oh, no, I just got it straight. I said, so God is a bad filmmaker?
Oh, no.
Really? I thought we were supposed to seek excellence and seek quality and strive for doing better at the, and influence the most powerful person in Hollywood. The most powerful person in Hollywood is not the people at the Producers Guild meeting. It's the 18 to 24-year-old who goes to movies. That's why that's our biggest audience. That's why most of the people who work for Movie Guide are under 30. And those are the people that are making difference. And we know how to teach them to be culture-wise. When I was head of the TV department at City University of New York, 60 professors got together to put together the first media literacy course. We've seen this work all over the world. The interesting thing is that I'll go to Korea and they will fill up a baseball stadium in Suwon, perhaps because Kim organizes it. But you go to the United States and we're not interested in cultural wisdom. And I tried to figure that out for a long time. Why can I go to Korea or India or someplace else and people are dying to protect their children, dying to teach their children to be culture-wise? And I said, I think it's because we're like the frog in the kettle, but we think we're in a hot tub and we're having a good time while we're being boiled to death. They know that they don't want their children to emulate this behavior. And quite often they get angry at us because of the behavior that we ship overseas. So we have a 6-week course in it for churches. What you want to do if you're going to teach your kids to be culture-wise is to understand the influence of the entertainment industry. You all do that, the children's stages of development. I see people taking their little children. What was the new movie? Nymphomaniac. The theater in New York. Nymphomaniac is 3 hours of something that shouldn't be shown to children. The theater of New York said, bring your children. And if you don't have money for a babysitter. Now, you look at the child, and the child just assumes that the child's doing nothing. But actually, they're processing that information. Their brain is getting rewired, as Dr. Donald Hilton says. They're getting their scripts of behavior of how they treat the other person. With all that sadomasochism and everything, is that what you want your children to have as their scripts of behavior? Understand the grammar of the entertainment industry. I love writing books. I'm finishing a novel with my second son. I'm finishing another book with my third son. I love that. We all like to write. We went to Dartmouth and all those other schools. That's what you learn to do. But the world, we're not teaching kids to be discerning. The same way we're teaching the grammar of the written word from the time they're in kindergarten until they get through college, we should be teaching the grammar of the mass media of entertainment. On every level, from the ontology to the epistemology to the semantics and syntactics. And if you just look at me, and poor Michael and Corey have seen this and Sarah Jane a million times, and would you do this? Everybody looking at me? Does everybody put your hand on your chin? Would you do that? And almost all of you have your hand on your cheek. And I said chin. Because the visual dominates. Now I can prove that to you another way. I have a heart problem, not as severe as yours. And so I started taking Lipitor because I was watching these commercials, and Lipitor, the guy's lying down and he doesn't have any breath, and I've had a little bit of a breath problem here. And suddenly he takes Lipitor and he's dancing with his wife, and the sun is shining and he's on the beach. And meanwhile there's this crawl. Well, if you get seizures, if you collapse, I got all of that bad stuff. My third son had to rush me to the emergency room because of the effect. My legs, I couldn't stand up. The room was spinning around. So we look at the visual of the benefits of Lipitor, but we don't read the text. We don't know that it's supposed to be our chin and not our cheek. Understand your moral, spiritual values, and I know at Baylor you all understand that. Understand your answers. How do you ask the right questions? Who is the hero? How does he solve the plot problem? And there are a lot of others. We use 122 questions for Movie Guide. We were talking today about Noah, and you can disagree with me with Noah, and somebody I know very well has written a great article about all of the Book of Enoch and the influence of Noah. But the fact of the matter is, at the root of it, my two friends who are the head of Paramount wanted to have a story of redemption. So at the beginning, man is sinful, man is cursed. Gee, that agrees with the Bible. And God is sovereign. He can bring judgment. He's in charge. And man needs to repent. Sounds like somebody. And at the end, he's told to go be fruitful and multiply. Now, as a guy who started the environmental studies program at NYU Law and then at the U.S. Attorney's Office, no environmentalist before I came to Christ wants people to be fruitful and multiply, because the bears are going to suffer. I mean, this is a radical statement of grace, whether we like the rest of the junk that they've thrown in there or not. And it is a movie, and you throw in junk in every movie. We analyze movies. We don't do thumbs up or thumbs down. Germany pays us to reprint our reviews in Germany, Russia, Korea. So, now this is one of my favorite stories. Have you heard this story before? You know the story of Telemachus? Well, of course you do, Pete. How many people know the story of Telemachus, and I won't tell it? Okay, 4. On a quick count. Well, this is Ronald Reagan's favorite story, but it was also Teddy Roosevelt's favorite story, and he wrote a book called The Man in the Arena, which was one of his short books. Telemachus was a Christian who lived on the edge of the Roman Empire, above the Alps. And he decided that God had called him, and he went to Rome. He didn't know why he was going to Rome. And he got there, and he was directed to go to the Colosseum. Now, I don't know whether you know, but the Colosseum had gone on for hundreds of years. At one point, one Josephus says like 63,000 people were killed in one Colosseum in a week. Whole species of animals, if you don't care about people, were wiped out, like the Judean lion, etc. Because they were killing them in such droves. They would ship them over for Africa and just kill these animals. And Telemachus is sitting at the top, and he says, he sees this, and he's just shocked, and he says, "Stop in the name of Jesus Christ." And they don't stop. So Telemachus jumps into the arena. Now the walls were high enough that the lions, the tigers, the bears couldn't jump over him. And as he's sinking to his knees, he said, "Stop in the name of Jesus Christ." And the people put thumbs down. Actually, it was thumbs up. For those of you who know Roman history, that means kill him. But we're going to go with the cultural norm. So they put thumbs down, and they started to stone him to death. And as he was dying, a gladiator ran him through. And he looked up at the Emperor Honorius, and he said, "Stop in the name of Jesus Christ." That day, the emperor stopped the games. There was never another gladiatorial game. One person going into the arena can make a difference. One school with a program to teach kids to make the best movies, the best entertainment, to tell the stories. You can make a difference. With all the people in Rome, this one man called by God, Byron, whoever it is, can make a difference. So out there you've got tools, you've got the how to succeed in Hollywood without losing your soul. Corey, you say your daughter loves that?
Oh, she's been spreading it throughout the campus.
Right. And then you've got the culture-wise family, and we're here to help you. That's what we do. We're only here to help you, to make a difference. So God bless you and have a great day. That's why I invited all my friends so they could ask questions and I wouldn't get any bad questions. Yes?
Does your website have a current guide that's kept up to date on current movies that are family friendly?
Every one of them. We review, thank you. Wait, did I ask you to say this?
No.
We review 100% of the
Six
movies
grandchildren.
that open in a couple of theaters or more. We don't review the movies that open in one theater or the college movies because we're swamped by a tidal wave of movies. So the reason we do this analysis is because, and the reason that the Wall Street Journal and places quote us, is because we're so thorough. And we know and every Tuesday we send you a little email for free telling you what's coming out that day, and then every Friday we said, do you get that
Yes.
email? Okay, and so we're here for you. That's it.
The really cool thing about it is it not only gives ratings quality, but it gives breakdowns of worldview, biblical worldview, whatever the culture is being presented. That's the best thing about that to me, is that it demonstrates cultural worldview.
Yes, sir.
I just have a question. So in your grouping of movies, you grouped together, you included Christian and moral in the same kind of rubric in terms
No.
of,
No.
I'm misunderstanding something then.
We look at these 122 criteria. And when we look at, let's say, Christian, there's a whole article about Son of God, about the 9 fundamentals. We want to look at the ontology. For instance, is it a real ontology? My wife has been on chemo for 19 years, so is it a real world with real pain, with real suffering, that you can't just wish away? Ontological nominalism, name it or claim it, sorry. That you need God. And that's what most people realize, even in cultures that are nominalistic. So number one, we look at the ontology, we look at the epistemology. Can we really know the truth? The question of the Bible. Is there a way to know that the Bible has changed my life? Well, I know. I was living before when I can tell you story after story. People who never recover. It changes your life. So the epistemological question, the semantic question, the syntactical question, before you get to the point that it gets even close to being Christian, it's got to have all that beside the overt elements. I mean, you can have the overt elements like the last temptation of Christ set in an ontologically nominalistic universe that contradicts the very essence of the gospel. Noah comes close to contradicting it. It doesn't, because I know the guys at Paramount, but it came close. It came closer 6 months ago. And by the way, with regard to Noah, movies are edited up to the day that they're released. Toy Story, I helped teach them when I was head of the TV department at City University of New York. The 5 guys who founded Pixar came and took a class. It's written up in their book, The History of Pixar. And they made a lousy movie and it bombed. And then they waited until the mid-90s to do Toy Story. And 6 months out, it was a disaster. So I saw it 6 months out, and they were editing. 4 months out, they were editing. Steve Jobs thought, I've lost all my money. Disney was about to give up. Jobs almost had a heart attack. 5 months. Every month I would see this movie. 1 week out, I brought my board to watch it. They flew my board out. And the day before it opened, it was still editing. So that's the way Hollywood usually, they're concerned. The Pixar rule is if there's somebody at Pixar who has a problem with their movie, they got to say, what's wrong? Even the janitor, how can I fix it? So it's a whole plethora. And then if you take, we go C, double C, triple C, then you get up from 122 criteria to about 300 criteria. We do analysis. We don't do thumbs up or thumbs down. No. Any other questions?
One other question.
Good.
Why did the movie Saving Mr. Banks not get awards or do better at the box office? I thought it should have been a blockbuster.
I think it's one of the best scripts ever written, for many ways. I think they misjudged who the audience was, and they didn't deliver on the payload. Now, I'm just being blunt.
No, I'm
But,
asking.
Finding Nemo, what's Finding Nemo about? My wife hates to know the end of the movie at the beginning, but Finding Nemo, what is it about? Finding Nemo.
Right.
And Saving Mr. Banks, which I loved, and I cried. You never save her father.
Yeah.
You don't even save her. So the problem is that
It's really
the
about
title
Disney.
does not fulfill itself in the story. So people were walking out wondering why it was ambiguous and ambivalent. I think there's some great Christian content there, especially from Disney, whose father was a Calvinist. I think it portrayed his father as being too tough from what I know of the story. But it just wasn't structured to deliver on the payload. Apollo 13, what do we want? We wanted to get back to Earth. It's a Wonderful Life. God says to Clarence, who wants to get his wings, consider George Bailey. Right at the beginning, you know what the jeopardy is, what the plot is. At the end of it, you want George Bailey to be saved. Now, Clarence has to go to a lot of work to get George Bailey saved, but that's what we want. We want Mr. Banks to be saved. And her father died of alcoholism and never was saved. Anybody else? Yes?
So as you talk about your relationship with people in Hollywood, I guess a casual observer would expect that you would have an antagonistic relationship with many people in Hollywood, but that are not believers, but apparently that's not the case at all. Has that surprised you?
No, because I grew up in the entertainment industry. What surprised me in the beginning, you know, from my church, etc., is not the negatives from Hollywood, which there's very little of it. Not even negatives from the press, because I get very little of that in the entertainment press. I speak at the Variety Conference, it's the negatives in the church. That's where the confusion is. And I think there are two poles to that confusion. You know, I went to an Episcopal seminary. I think that one pole is antinomian, and the other pole is Donatist, and those poles are struggling. So you don't have a full-orbed theology that starts at Genesis and ends at Revelation. Now, I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just saying, so you get people who seize on their particular flavor and they become very negative. And they haven't thought through all the consequences. I mean, I cannot tell you, I won't use Noah as an example, but the Son of God, how many people are criticizing the Son of God? And one of the criticisms, of course, is, you know, like the star, the Portuguese star is not Christian or whatever else. In fact, I had a friend of mine call Phil Cook. He said, this is a lot of my blog, is that people are criticizing these people aren't Christian. And I think I said it to you earlier today. You know, well, there have been 130 Jesus films, and most of them have not been made by Christians. And most of them didn't star Christians. You know, and even the King of Kings in 1927, you know, one of the greatest actors ran away with the script girl and almost broke Cecil B. DeMille's heart. So, you know, it's the movie business. They want to succeed. They got to support a big organization. They understand that we're helping them. The church, though, when it gets vituperative and angry over the minor details in Son of God wouldn't be the way I presented the gospel. You know, I guess, I don't know if I told you this, but I guess I did. I give this talk quite often, and I apologize. I'd like to go further than Sarah Jane has heard my further elements of the talk, but I was showing the Passion of the Christ at Mission America. Did I tell you this? And one of the pastors from Houston, who's very famous, said, why do we need another Jesus film? We've got the Jesus film. And I said, you know, that's a great question. Why did God need Mark, Luke, and John? He had Matthew. I came to Christ in Matthew. You know, evidently God made this big mistake, you know, and suddenly the light goes on. I said, these films, 130 films about Jesus, are like sermons. I have never gone into a church and heard a perfect sermon, except mine. No. They do not cover the whole gospel. So let's get over it. If there are 130 of these, they're going to reach different people. Mark is the common man, and Luke is the professional, and John is the mystic. We know all this. Let's have more that express more ideas, more movies about the Bible, and then we can engage in it and talk about it. More movies about people surviving terrible circumstances. Let's have movies about hope in the face of danger. Let's have a whole range. So, do we just want one preacher, the guy from Houston? I don't think so. Do we just want Billy Graham? I don't think so. We want more. Anybody else? And then I'll... Yeah.
I want to have a comment on that, and then I have a question for you. And that is, I work in the entertainment industry, and I find that when I'm on a set, it's a way to minister to other actors. And if we don't plant the seeds while we're shooting the movie, how can we do it? So if people are arguing in the church that, hey, you know, that person's not a Christian, well, how do you expect them to get there? And how do you expect them to take it to another film? Or how do you expect them to affect another person?
Well, did you see Mel Gibson's, the person who wrote the article that Mel Gibson should be accepted back in Hollywood again? Did anybody read that article? And he said Mel has made every effort to change. He's spoken at B'nai B'rith, he's spoken at the Prince League, he's gone to synagogues, he's tried. And he says, of course, we don't know whether, I know Mel Gibson, I've met him, but I don't know whether he really means it. I can't judge a person's heart, but he says he was so angry at all of the Jewish backlash against the Passion, which he tried not to make anti-Semitic, that he just exploded. It destroyed his life, and he's never been accepted back into Hollywood. So last week, I was doing a radio program with some national person, or maybe the Wall Street Journal interview or whatever, and I said, aren't we doing this with Aronofsky? He's going to walk away from this experience, you know, from his Jewish atheist background, like, you know, I was an atheist, and he'd say, these people in the church hate me. Do we hate Aronofsky? He tried to make Noah. He put in a lot of Talmudic silliness. You can read the article at movieguide.org. But we don't hate Aronofsky for trying. I would like to go and sit down with Aronofsky, because I know his executive producer, and say, you know, I'm happy you've just tried to make this movie. And I'd like to show you why people are upset. But this meanness that I get every day, and I don't get meanness from Hollywood, I get meanness from the people who should show love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faith, gentleness, and self-control. If the Spirit of God in us, if we want to be more like Jesus, that should be the marks of our maturity. Yes?
No, that's the question.
Yeah, was that your, I thought that was your
That was-
question.
no, it was my
Okay,
question.
everybody's leaving, so we
And I can
better.
make it quick. I was just wondering about crossing over into other media platforms, if Movie Guide is going to start crossing over.
We'd
soon.
love to, you know, we need about another 4 million, but Byron could ask Jack Templeton to do that. Yeah, I'd love to, yeah.
Because I know you're focusing on the theatrical release, we get DVD.
Because with limited resources, this is like one person described it like the diamond. You know, you make a big movie and that's the diamond in the setting. With television, you forget. Did you see the last episode of Shark Tank last night? Well, see, you didn't even watch it.
No, I didn't.
Actually, television,
Or Duck
for all of the
Dynasty.
comments about television, there are 3 television audiences. There's the guy who comes home from work and he puts his feet up and he watches television for the next, that's about a third. And I've got studies on here to show you who watches television. And then there's a third that are professionals. They can't watch television all the time. They're sitting listening to my silly lecture. So they have to make a choice that they're going to watch just the Olympics or they're going to watch just, you know, the Malaysian flight or whatever. And then there's a third, which are usually the people in the highest income bracket who never watch television. So movies actually have more cachet within the culture. And that's why we do it, because we get a bigger platform. It gives us more leverage. Yes, Peter? Yes?
I wanted to ask about judging content, and you talk about how oftentimes that the church will shoot itself in the foot by getting very angry over problems that may not be all they're worked up to be. Where do you see the line as being, okay, this has some issues, but there's a good core to it, and we recognize the problems, but still accept it, and where's the, okay, there may be some good things in here, but this has gone too far? Where do you draw the line? I guess you talked about you don't give a straight thumbs up or thumbs down, but...
Right. What we do is try to help people develop discernment by giving them the information and then helping them reveal it. One radio host died. He said, my daughter wanted to see this movie, and then she read it. I had to read your content section, and the woman's head was cut off and used as a soccer ball or something. And she read that, even though all her friends wanted to go see the movie. It was a comedy. And that was supposed to be funny. You know, hang over a giraffe getting impaled on the freeway is supposed to be funny. But anyway, whatever you think, I don't want to make that decision. But she saw that and she said, I'm not gonna go, and I'm gonna tell my friends, I don't wanna see a woman's head cut off and used as a basketball or football, or whatever they did in the movie. So we're trying to get people to develop discernment, to start thinking through what are the things, and you be the judge. I really believe, and Peter can tell you this if you want to talk, that the more you start exercising discernment, the more careful you get, and the more your choices reflect that discernment. And the more you ignore, what the issues are, the less careful, and the more you buy into those scripts of behavior. Okay, I'm going to let you go, because thank you so much.
Thank you, Ted.
Really, God bless you.